You're watching CCN, Clarksville Community Network. Produced by Goodwin Productions. Powered by CDE Lightband.
Hi folks, I'm Terry Jordan, exhibits curator here at the Customs House Museum, and we are standing in one of our newest exhibits celebrating 100 years of the women's suffrage. Some of the things that we're featuring as part of the celebration include artifacts from the museum collections, borrowed photos from several organizations in town. All these things of trying to tell the story of how the suffrage movement helped the women of Montgomery County. Some of the things included in our show are visual artifacts from places like the First Women's Bank of Clarksville, which was started in 1919 by Brenda Runyon, and it was staffed completely by women. We have some of the stock certificates and checks. The bank started with the first check deposit of $5.95. There's some great different ways that we can tell the story of the women of Clarksville through these photos and these artifacts. Some of the ways that the whole women's movement started goes back to the Civil War. So while the men were away, the women ran the businesses, they ran the farms, they ran the families. And after the war ended, they continued to foray themselves more into the public society scenes through volunteering and creating Bible study classes and sewing clubs, and went to work more into the education and healthcare fields. And part of this building up of clubs in Clarksville was started by the Clarksville Women's Club in 1918. One of its leaders was Ms. Brenda Runyon, who is also the founder of the First Women's Bank. One of the great things about the museum and doing these exhibits for the public is they usually bring you people and information from the community that you didn't know was out there. And when we started this exhibit through our contacts, we were contacted by some of the ladies from the Country Women's Club, and that has brought us all kinds of information on another part of Clarksville that we didn't have, that we will now have in our museum archives. And the Country Women's Club was started by Miss Irene Polk, whose picture is right here. And like the Women's Club of Clarksville, the Country Women's Club was a place where they could meet and talk about arts and politics and all other aspects of society, almost like study groups. So here we have a certificate from when the site became put on the historic register, and some of the newspaper clippings and posters from the different activities that they did. A lot of these clubs would do a lot of social activities like plays, dances, and throughout this exhibit you'll see a lot of memorabilia from those things, like dance cards and programs from performances. The suffrage movement also affected women and the arts. It enabled a lot of women to start training more in the arts, particularly in New York. And it has influenced even, especially to this day, with the resurgence of art created in honor of the suffrage movement. One of our great Tennessee sculptors, Al McQuire, has done a whole series of figurative work featuring the women who were involved with the suffrage movement of the state. And you can see his sculptures throughout the city of Knoxville, Nashville, and soon to be Memphis as well. And for our show, Alan was kind enough to do a cast of one of the suffragists from the Memphis area, Susan Shelton White. So she became involved in the movement in around 1912, and she was the secretary for the Tennessee Equal Suffrage Association in 1913. She went on to move to DC and did a lot of work there with government officials. She had quite an industrious career, continuing throughout it to work for women's rights. And so we're thrilled to have this bust from Alma McQuire. And since a lot of this pertains back to politics, we thought it would be fun to pull out our voting board behind me. The significance of this one is it was damaged during the tornadoes that came through here 20 years ago. So we thought that would be fun to bring out so people can experience it again, since we're talking about politics and the right to vote. Throughout the exhibit, you'll see on the walls these fantastic reproductions of articles from newspapers over the time talking about should women vote, will they be registered, when they get to vote. So we're hoping that you'll take the time and look through them. You might see some familiar names within the articles, but they really tell the story about the process of voting here in Montgomery County. One of our favorite things that we brought out for this exhibit is this voting booth behind me. This is the first time this item from the collection has ever been exhibited, so we're thrilled about that. We're very excited to let people come in. You can step right inside it and see who was on the roster at the time. Familiar names like Riley Darnell, Don Sundquist, and Carol Rice. So we're thrilled to see some ladies on the voting ballot in there. And we hope you'll come in and take a peek and think about who you would have voted for. Tennessee has the distinction of being the 36th state that was needed to ratify the amendment so women could vote. But that's part of the whole national story. And we are thrilled to be able to present the national story through partnership with the National Archives. So when guests come in, you'll not only learn about the local women of our area, but you can also learn about the national story here too. We hope you'll come down and see our entire show and spend some time learning about the women of Montgomery County and the right to vote. The exhibit is up through October, so there's plenty of days to come visit us and cast a vote.
Tennessee played the most important role in suffrage. And suffrage is a funny word. You know, I don't think any of us get it when we say suffrage. It really means the right to vote. And even as late as 1920, women were not allowed to vote. That's incomprehensible. The right to vote is pivotal. If you can vote, you can change anything. Tennessee literally was the last hope for ratification. Otherwise, they were going to have to start all over again. And so Tennessee was known as the perfect 36. There had to be 36 states to ratify it in order for it to be a constitutional amendment. All the energy of all the suffragists, of all the people that were against suffrage, and there were plenty, came together and fought it out. It was hard fought. It was not a done deal. And women who had worked on suffrage all over the country came. We had suffragists from Clarksville that went to Nashville to lobby, and it passed in our historic capital. You can walk in there today into the House of Representatives, into our House chamber, and look around, and you can see where that historic vote was passed. And it passed by one vote when a young man who was the youngest representative in the chamber received a letter from his mom, and it said, "Harry, be a good boy and vote to ratify." And he did. And I think a beautiful picture of this so that you can really vision it. The anti-suffragists wore red roses, and those who were for suffrage wore yellow. And the yellow roses, when the vote was cast and suffrage won, the women in the gallery tore up their yellow roses and threw the petals down on the floor. So you can just see all these yellow petals coming down, and it was victory. And so that's why Tennessee was so important. And our monument is Tennessee Triumph.
I'm Condra Smalley. I'm Senior Vice President of Marketing at F&M Bank. I also served on the committee for the women's suffrage anniversary here in Montgomery County. I was pleased to be asked to serve on a committee of 20 plus women who were interested in making sure that this event was recognized with the support of city, county, government officials, in addition to many local small businesses, community banks, my own F&M Bank included, but we had several community banks who rose to the occasion to help make this event possible. The culmination of the event will be the parade starts at the courthouse on Saturday, August the 15th, goes down Franklin Street to the statue on Public Square that's located right in front of F&M Bank and Parks and Recreation. I will be in the parade. The committee will be doing the walking, leading the parade. We have music that will also be included. As a bank sponsorship, I will be participating in the unveiling. So it's a pretty exciting day for me as well.
The suffrage monument that we created, we decided as a group that we didn't want her to be one person. She's not one famous person. She is every woman. And I think that that's the beauty of her, is she's not designed to be a model. She looks like an everyday woman. And she reflects the fact that these were everyday women who wanted to change the system. It was everyday women who bathed their children and cooked supper and hang out the wash who did this, who came together, who spoke up, who marched, who tried to lobby people to change the law. And we think that's what she looks like, an everyday woman in everyday clothing of that period. And our monument, she actually is voting. And she also holds a scroll that reminds us, the women of today. And what it says is, women, use your vote.
The maquette was on exhibit in the lobbies. We were able to display what the statue would look like for several months. And we had people come by just out of curiosity. The workmanship of both the mock and the actual statue itself have been well documented, as you will notice on the maquette, and as well as the actual statue. It's intentional that the woman's face, you're not able to tell whether she was black or white or Asian or any features, so that everyone or every woman that looks at the statue can find a feature of themselves. And that was a critical discussion from those in the committee, deciding what we wanted it to look like or what the intent would be, but everyone should be able to see themselves in that statue at any time. But one thing that has struck me personally was the inclusion of a hat. And for that era, hats were symbolic for women of, statue of women who wanted to look good, of the attire for that. And anyone who knows me and my family well knows that hats play a very significant role in our lives, as my mother traditionally, and along with others in the black community and white communities, always wore hats as a symbol of, being dressed up or just walking around town. I'm sure during the parade that you'll see a lot of ladies in hats of different sizes, shapes, colors, but just symbolic of that era.
For me personally, my political involvement, I'm just a regular person. I wasn't born into a family that I didn't have someone that encouraged me to run for office or something. Regular person. I did, however, my dad did run for city council, and I saw my dad go to meetings where he would speak up and he would say what he thought about an issue. And as a child, one of the good, really important skills that my dad made sure that all of us girls, I have 3 sisters, all of us had to develop was the ability to speak in public. And that encouraged us not only to think for ourselves, but to be able to communicate what you think. And I think that's the most important skill that women need, particularly Southern women who aren't really socialized to be the one to say, "Excuse me." I started attending meetings and I saw how it worked and how those decisions were made. It was very local, it was about my children, it was about speaking up for something that I thought we could improve. From the county commission, I ran for a House seat and I lost. And then I ran for a Senate seat and I won. And I stayed in the Senate for 12 years. So I like the political arena. Just recently, I went back again to the Senate and served an interim time. Loved it, enjoyed it. I love the process. Everybody says it, but everybody says it because it's true. You run for office because you think you can make a difference. And that really is why most people run for office, is you think you have something to offer and you want to. You want to see what you can do as an individual to make life better for other people. It's wonderful to be able to be involved in your own government and your own future, because it affects, sometimes people criticize government, but government is what builds roads and schools and hospitals and helps people with their Social Security or their health insurance. I mean, we have an opportunity to do some good in this world, and I think that's why everyone runs. But there's also all kinds of other ways that you can be involved, and I like to think that I am still involved in my community.
The museum has done a fabulous job of portraying the historical events and activities. So I would encourage people to come to Customs House Museum to learn more about the suffrage movement and the things that women were able to accomplish. But the reality is that the struggle's not over. The struggle was not over just by getting the right to vote. The struggle for us now as women in general, African American women in particular, is to use that right. Because there are still inequities that only voting will right and correct. And the history that we are talking about today from the 1920s, in 2120, what will they say about the things that we've done? What will your children, your grandchildren, both male and female, have to say about what happened in the year 2020?
This is the 100th year anniversary, and that just has kind of a magic to it. When you think about that 100 years ago, women couldn't vote, and that draws people to say, how could that be? And how do we celebrate that now we are fully engaged in being able to vote, and not only being able to vote, but to run for office. And I think that many people just they felt it, it drew them. And that's how this came about, is we wanted to fill that with some tangible, visual remembrance, and particularly to honor not just suffragists in general, but Clarksville suffragists. The names of all the suffragists that we could find are listed on the monument. So it's a tribute to Clarksville women.
One thing that has been a talking point are the number of people who bought bricks in commemorating the names and women throughout history of Clarksville, Montgomery County that have contributed to various events, various purposes and causes. And it's interesting to see the names of those women engraved forever or listed forever in the bricks around the statue. It's a great movement. It's not only a movement for, obviously, the right to vote, but the empowerment of women in Montgomery County and the things that we are able to accomplish. 2 African American women in Montgomery County who were among the first voters in Montgomery County, and we are still have yet to identify those 2 women. So that is a personal task to reach out to friends, family members, church members, relatives. If you can help us identify those 2 women, we are holding 2 bricks in the pavement around the statue that will, we hope at one point, to be able to identify the names of those 2 women and their families.
I grew up in Midland, Texas, and my husband grew up in El Paso. And after he left the Navy, we started looking for a place to live. We knew, after having lived in Arkansas and North Carolina, that there was absolutely no going back to the deserts of West Texas. And you know, Tennessee is green and beautiful, and we looked for a home here, and we settled on Clarksville. My husband was opening his dermatology practice, and I wanted to live in a place, and he did too, where we could raise a family. This is an open community. I love the fact that we have a military post. That brings us so much. We have people from all over this world that live in Clarksville, and we have an opportunity to benefit from all of that experience. Culturally, Clarksville is a town with great history and folks who value that history. And I think probably the magic ingredient of Clarksville is that we all want to be here. Many of the folks who have lived all over the world have chosen Clarksville to retire. And so it's a community not of people who are forced to be here, but people who choose this place and want to be here. And because they've chosen it, they work to make it a very open, encompassing community that provides a place to raise a family for everyone.
When the organizing group came and they were trying to get diversity, I respected the fact that they were looking for diversity not just in black, white, they were looking for diversity in age, they were looking for diversity in education, and wanted to have a group of women come together, work on a project, successfully work on a project that was going to benefit this community and benefit the community for a long time. Because this is not going to go away, and it's going to be a reminder, hopefully a reminder for years to come. Not just for women of my age, when we talk about demographics, but people of my age, but for my nieces and nephews, their friends and the children that are people that are coming up behind us. That it's important not only to vote, but to get involved. There's a lot of very worthwhile, very worthy organizations in this town that look for opportunities to get people involved. And this was just one of the committees that I was able to do that with. I get it honestly, working with a community that you love. Many people know my mother, who was a long-term teacher. In fact, one of the bricks in the area is dedicated to her. But she loves this Clarksville community and instilled that into my sister and I as to it's important to give back. And there are a lot of things, it's not always about money and it's not always about influence, but it's about building relationships. And the relationships that I've built by working on this committee, the relationships that you build by just getting involved in area activities or support of community activities has been, not been only beneficial for the groups that we participate in, but beneficial to us personally. For young women, the advice I'd have for young women, one, get your education, first and foremost. Not everyone is designed to be a doctor, to earn a doctorate degree or a master's degree, but to finish high school or college or whatever, realm. But education is not only about a piece of paper, it's about what you learn and then how you apply it. And then it's about building relationships. Look and get involved and just ask. Very few of the organizations that are active in Clarksville who are looking for volunteers, the museum, the Roxy, a lot of the events downtown, and throughout Clarksville community. Obviously with the pandemic and social distancing, that has become a little different. There's a different look to it now than it was previously. But there are very few organizations that I'm aware of, United Way, Red Cross, that are looking for big brothers, big sisters, that look for volunteers. And when someone says, I'm here to volunteer, that they say no. So, and if you haven't, if you have trouble looking for areas to volunteer in, call me. Come by and see me, or send me a message on Facebook that says, I want to help. And I'll help you find an organization to become involved in. Those who know me and know me well know that I love this Clarksville community.
Tennessee's triumph.
For current and exclusive content, subscribe to CDE Lightband, connecting you at the speed of light.